everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got a Sig Sauer P938 on the table. It's a concealed carry handgun, that's the target market for it, chambered in 9mm. There's quite a lot of things that are kind of cool about this little gun, and the 938 series comes in a number of different variations. This particular one is the Equinox, and what stands out different with the Equinox are these grips, these Hogue Blackwood grips. The nitron stainless steel slide that's got blackout here and polished on the sides really makes it a nice contrast. It has stainless steel hardware for the controls, which has a nickel finish, and it's an alloy frame. So I picked the gun up and show you a few things about it. We'll start out with ensuring that we do have an unloaded gun. The flush mount magazine fits very flush, goes right up in there, nothing hanging out to snag, and it holds 6 rounds. It's a steel magazine with a steel follower. So they're very high quality magazines. There is also a 7-round magazine with a rubber base plate, a little bit of a pinky extender. Gives you a place to put your pinky finger. Now we did find when we were shooting this that with this particular magazine in it, with the pinky extender, it really did make it difficult to get our better groups. It kind of threw our grouping off. So that little bit of change in the grip had an effect on how well we were able to shoot this gun. Both of us shot better with the flush mount magazine. A few of the other features of it is there's nice texturing on this wood grip. And these are custom grips that are for the 938 series, and they're nicely textured. Very dark wood, so it's very, very difficult to see the texturing on these. Zoom in a little bit, you can see the texturing. It's kind of a little bit sandpaperish, but it doesn't abrade your hands or hurt in any way, but it does give you a nice solid, firm grip on what is a very small gun. The back straps are changeable. This particular one has texturing on it, and you can get additional back straps from Hogue. No additional ones come with the gun. They're a little bit expensive. They're around $50 retail. The front strap also has texturing. So it's going to be very easy to keep this thing in your hand. Despite the small size, it's not going to slip out of your hand even if you're a little bit sweaty or you've been going at it a little while. The sights are very nice 3-dot sights. The front is a True Glow TFO, and this particular one is green, and the rear sights are Sig Light. So what they are is they're a tritium insert with a white ring around it. And the nice thing about that is the tritium insert, of course, gives you the night vision capability, or the ability to see the sights at night, and the white ring makes them visible during the day. And, a lot of night sights are very gray during the day and they're hard to see. So this gives you that balance between the two. Both of them are dovetailed and can be swapped out if you choose to. However, this particular sight combination is a very good combination. You're unlikely to want to swap them out unless you damage one of them. On the other side of the gun, you can see that it says Equinox, and it's done nicely. There's not a lot of excessive writing on the gun. Some guns you get them and there's all sorts of things stamped all over them. This was kind of clean and nice looking. Well, I had it over on that side too. You'll see that the safety is ambidextrous. The magazine release is on this side only for right-handed shooters and is not reversible. The grips can be changed out. And unlike a 1911, even if the safety is in the on position, you can cycle the slide. But if the hammer is down, you also can put the safety on even with the hammer down. But it does block the hammer if the safety is on, so you won't be able to cycle the slide if the hammer happens to be down. And before I forget to mention it, it's an alloy frame. It's a hard anodized alloy frame, so that it does take quite a bit of weight off at least the bottom half of it. But the stainless slide, it feels a little heavy in your hand, mainly because something this small you're expecting to be lighter. But it feels nice and solid. It's a well-constructed gun. So let's talk about the dimensions while I've got it sitting here in my hand. It's 5.5 inches long, it's 3.9 inches tall, and it's only 1.1 inches thick at the slide. Now when you get the controls on here, that's going to of course puff it out a little bit with the controls. But for the frame and slide, it's 1.1 inches. And as I mentioned earlier, it weighs 15.2 ounces. So definitely a very small gun, easy to stow anywhere you're wanting it. And in those cases where what you have to dress or where you're going to go is limiting your flexibility, you can probably find a way to carry this particular gun so that you can at least have something on you. I'd mentioned the thumb safety earlier. It does have a drop safety as well, an integral drop safety. So this is a drop safe weapon, and it is a weapon that should be safe to carry in any position. The trigger comes in around 7.5 pounds according to Sig, and it does kind of feel that way. It's kind of hard to tell with the trigger, so I'm going to go ahead and cock it. It's kind of hard to tell because the trigger's so short, but I've got my finger on it. That's all of the take-up right there. That take-up is all there is. And now I'm building up pressure, building up pressure, building up pressure, and then it just breaks. It's a very short, quick, clean break. And of course it is a single action only, so like in 1911 it has to either be manually cocked or in the cocked and locked position, which would be, you've cycled it, you've put the safety on it, it's ready to go, and to fire it you drop the safety, pull the trigger. From a reset perspective, like in 1911, the reset is basically all the way out, but all the way out's not all that far. Again, you got that very, very minimal take-up, a very stiff wall, and then an extremely short, crisp break. So it's a very nice trigger. A little bit heavier than you might expect. A classic 1911 would be a couple pounds lighter, but it's not excessively heavy, and due to the fact that it's so short, the trigger really doesn't throw off your aim. Of course, as we get more rounds down range and break it in, I think the trigger will probably lighten up a hair, but that short crispness of it will keep it, a very nice trigger, and very easy to keep a clean shot with it. Now, we did find that with this gun, we had a little harder time getting nice groups with it, not because of any inaccuracy inherent to the gun. It's just so small that when you've got a hold of this thing, your hands kind of bury it. So it's a little bit hard to get a good, consistent grip with the gun, only because of its size. And that's why I think that extended magazine had an effect on our ability to aim it well, because it threw off our grip just enough to make it a little more difficult to get good groups with that magazine. So this is kind of going to vary based on your individual hand size, your grip, and everything else. But with the flush mount magazine, I pretty much get a 2-finger grip on it, and the pinky just kind of doesn't really do anything. And that allows me to kind of tighten up on it in the upper part of my hand. I was able to get a little bit better grouping with this setup. When I had the extended magazine on, the gun had a tendency more to want to rock as I closed in on it, as opposed to this where it's tended to be a little more stable. So, my choice would be to just use the flush magazine. The flush is 6 rounds, the extended is 7, and I just carry a backup magazine. But that's really going to vary depending on your hand, your grip, and and how well you can handle and hold such a small gun. So let me go ahead and show you how to disassemble the gun and show you some of the internal components. So we'll start with, as usual, making sure that we do have an unloaded gun. Now in this particular one, I found the easiest way to disassemble it is to have the hammer back, and then just pull it back until you line up that little half moon right there with the takedown pin. And I found the easiest way to hold it in that position, because you are up against the spring, is to put my finger inside the ejection port, just grab the slide, and then you just push this from the other side. There's a little, well, it fell out, there's a little hole there where the pin was, and I just reached around and pushed it, and it popped right out. And then grab the slide, take your finger out so you don't get bit, and then the slide just pops right off. Now we'll look at the frame a little bit, and then we'll talk about the slide. Frame is real simple, typical of the 1911 single action style guns. There's not a lot going on in there. The only thing you've got sticking up is the ejector. And you do have full-size rails. They go all the way up from here on this side. And of course this one has a little bit of a break in it for the slide release. So it's a really good solid rail system. And show you that side and that side. Now let's go ahead and look at the slide. So a couple of things about this. One is this recoil spring assembly is non-captive, and it's a flat spring. So you see it's kind of like a flat wafer spring. Makes it kind of squirrely. The spring is not going to want to stay consistent. It's going to want to twist around. So when I go to pull this off, I want to make sure I have my hand on it and I've got good control over it. You see right there the spring immediately wanted to twist and bend, because without being captive it does want to try to fly away on you. It's kind of an interesting little setup for this. The guide rod has a little well in it. You can kind of see it there that the spring drops down into. So it kind of captures the one side of the spring, and of course the bottom side of this sits up against the barrel, and of course they're easily separated. Now the barrel has the kidney style lug, so it doesn't have the drop lug like a 1911. Real smooth, well machined. It's got a very narrow feed ramp, but it is polished. And we haven't detected any ammo sensitivity with this. We were feeding it good ammo, we were feeding it junk ammo, and it just ate it up and ran. So we hadn't, from round 1 till the last round we fired through it, the gun did just function. Internally, the drop safety is over here in the corner. Right there's the drop safety pin. Other than that, it's a pretty simple slide. There's not really a lot going on in there. And consistent with what you'd expect from Sig. It's smoothly machined. The loading ramp is polished. So overall, it's a very nicely done, well-constructed slide. I have every expectation that this gun will be a long-lived and reliable gun. And with the stainless steel and the coatings, it should put up well with the unpleasant conditions that a carry gun, especially a small carry gun that you're going to hide someplace, tends to have to put up with. Now putting it back together is a little bit more of a hassle because of the spring. You just drop the barrel in place, and now comes the fun part, dealing with this recoil spring assembly. Of course, putting that part together is easy. But because this wafer spring doesn't have the same kind of integrity that a round spring would have as far as staying straight, it's going to be rather difficult to get this to go in easily. So the easiest way to do it, I find, is turn it so it's horizontal to you, so it's alongside you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide the spring in here. I'm going to use my fingers to create a little tunnel to guide it, get the recoil spring to protrude out of here, and then drop it in place. Now unfortunately my fingers will obscure some things, but see how wiggly and squirrely the spring is already. So I'm going to try to use just a couple fingers to guide it in place. And then I see it protrudes, and once it protrudes, then I can drop this down in place. That will take a little practice. Of all the different things they've done with the reassembly of this gun, that spring I wish they'd done a little differently. Probably they made it a wafer spring so that it can compress further. It'll actually go a little flatter and shorter than a round spring, so it gives them a little bit more room. But there you go, reassembled. Now putting it back on the frame is much easier than dealing with the spring, but that spring can be pretty ornery. The spring, of course, it's being a flat wafer spring. There's no end, no directionality to it, so either end can be used for the front or the back. Let me grab the frame and go ahead and put the frame on. You just line it up, slide it back. Now one thing you do have to do, and you've got to make sure you remember to do this before you push force on it, is you have to push the ejector down. I just use my finger now. Put it down until it clears. If it doesn't, it won't clear, and if you push pressure on it and try to force it, then you will break the ejector. Now you can see my hand through that little hole. That's the point you want to get it to, just like a 1911. Put the pin through to capture that kidney-shaped barrel. And then be careful with the pin. You want to keep the pin up high. Don't let it drag across the frame. And then you can push back on it. I usually just use my fingers at the front of the barrel to push back on it till it lines up, and then just drop it in place. It's easier to do it when you're facing yourself and not trying to show it on camera. But at that point it dropped down in, and now I have an operational gun. So it's relatively easy to maintain it. There's a couple quirky things, but it seems like every one of these little guns that I deal with, when you get down to this size, has some quirk. And really that's kind of the minimal, the least of all the ones that I've had as far as takedown and reassembly on these little guns. So let me show you a couple comparisons of other guns like this, this kind of a size territory. One of them might be this Car PM9, which of course is unloaded. And these are classically considered to be very, very small guns. And of course they are. When I set these two together, beaver tail to beaver tail, you'll see the car is just a hair shorter. If I go flush slide to slide, then they're roughly equal, but Sig does have a little bit more of a beaver tail. And if I bring them back so that you can see the backs, Now if I turn it this way, I'll go ahead and put the magazine in the gun so that you have a flat comparison. You can see from the back the P938 is a little bit thinner than the car. The car's just a little bit thicker. Now some of that thickness, by the way, that you're seeing is this whole grip we put on the car. But you can see down in here that the car's just a hair thicker. From a height perspective, they're roughly the same. The 938 is just a hair shorter. And when you get into the trigger guards and some of the body parts, this 938 is definitely shorter. So the 938 is smaller than even a PM9 in most dimensions. Not significantly, but just a little bit. And I also have this Sig P938 right here, which of course is also unloaded. Now this is basically the 380 version of this gun. And if I put these side by side, you'll see that the 938 is a little bit shorter, or the 238 is a little shorter in each dimension. And from a thickness at the back, they're basically the same. So what I'm looking at here is for a 1/4 inch in one direction, 1/8 of an inch in another direction, you can have the power of 9mm as opposed to 380. And chances are pretty good if you can conceal this in a particular location, then you can conceal this. So if you're wanting that 9mm capability, wanting something you could carry, this will give you what you want. If you want the absolute smallest in the series, then you'd step down to the 238 and have a 380. Overall, the gun comes in a number of different variations. If this particular one isn't the aesthetics you want, they've got it in rainbow and polished and blackout. There's just a couple dozen different variations on this gun that you can get from Sig, and then a number of different replaceable grips and other components that you can swap out, as well as the sights. So it's a real versatile platform that you can either buy right off the shelf, customize the way you want it. This one has an MSRP of around $815. I've seen them significantly less expensive than that. We got this one at a really good deal from our friends at Guns Galore. So they are out there at lower prices than MSRP, but it's not an inexpensive gun. But it's a very high quality gun, and it is worth what you pay for it, and should be reliable for many years to come. You often see it in the $750 to $799 territory on the street. So if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, and have a great day. Thank you.